opportunities, the register of vote, so try to
Probably no much for all shit on.
but maybe moving around so you can get
Yeah.
rid of the comments, there's just more each and every year. And I thought, like, over here kind of says,
One more for ID.
for specific representation. So, that main topic of
Alrighty, I think we're good. You guys hear me okay?
Mayor, could you give me just one
Yes,
moment,
ma'am.
please?
Absolutely.
I've got 3 tickets in Kansas City.
Apologize for the delay. We've had a little technology issues tonight. I think we've all been there before. But it's good to see a big crowd.
I noticed that.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm ready.
All right, thank you very much. Again, apologize for the delay. I can't sing or dance, so I didn't really have anything to entertain you with, but we'll get started. It's about almost, what, about 6:13. So with that, let's, I guess I'll call the meeting order. There we go. And we will call the roll.
Matthews,
Here.
Ingalls. Here. Flood,
Here.
Bolt,
Here.
Rutherford.
Here.
Seahorn.
Here.
Richter.
here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Matthews, would you?
Sure.
Invitation for us?
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to come together and consider the business of our community. Lord, we thank you for those who reside here, those that work here. Lord, we ask that you would be with us, lead and guide us in our discussions and our decisions tonight. Give us wisdom in all that we say and we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Join me in flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 1 tonight is citizen participation. Normal rules, 3-minute limit per person, 12 minutes per topic. And I have 2 folks that have signed up. First up is Rob Morris. There he is. How are you? There you go.
Here's the rules. I picked up at the back of the room. They're here every time we meet. So, the rules state, and these are comments to the commission, as the rules state I'm supposed to do also. City commission members shall not enter into dialogue with the speaker during the speaker's allotted time except to ask for clarification. After the speaker leaves the podium and before the next speaker is called, commissioners may respond, doesn't mean you have to, may respond to the speaker's comments, subject to the rules of the Oklahoma Open Meeting Act. So that does not mean you get to address any of us during commissioners' comments. It means you do it when I'm done, before the next person comes up here, if you're going to do it at all. So hopefully we can play by the rules tonight. As long as you will, I will too. Next up, where's everyone's financials disclosures? After that, we have the Homeless Resource Center. The memorandum of understanding that we have with them goes out the 31st of this month. It's not on the agenda tonight, so I guess it's closing. Is that correct? Let's see, make sure I'm doing this right. Don't want to break any rules. Address specific questions to the mayor or presiding officer. So, Mr. Mayor, why were you at Shawnee Ford the Wednesday, February 15th, when the resignation for the CEO of Shawnee Ford wasn't accepted or even public until the 17th? Also, how did you know about the new contract we're going to have with Shawnee Forward, but had no clue about the resignation or anything of, like you told us last time? Let's see, comments. We've had an influx of homeless down on Main Street, and one of the reasons why is us. It's a city. And it's a good thing we tore down the structure. It really is, because they were living in it. It's the old All-American Car Wash, and it's to the ground now. But when we closed that motel down, that's when we got the influx, where now it's tent city in a couple places. So when we say tonight that the homeless population dropped by 30%, man, it's not visible. Next, and make sure this is right. My comment to the board, a commissioner told me that I was allowed to ask a question of the Ward 2 commissioner and he would not kick me out. So, question is, if the Ward 2 commissioner could explain why you abstained when voting to accept or not accept the resignation for the Shawnee Forward CEO. And the very last thing is public comments. Public comments are ours. I mean, I know it's not a right given by the state and they can be taken away. But the first thing starts when somebody comes up here with a different opinion and you kick them out. Because then it turns into, I can't give my time to anyone anymore. So now you only have 3 minutes. After that, it turns into like the school board does, where you can only talk on agenda-specific items, meaning any other business out in town we don't get to bring up here anymore. And then finally, you take them away altogether. So I hope I'm wrong on this, but it's the road I see us going down. And, you know, maybe that'll pop up in the near future of something to discuss. It shouldn't. You guys should want the good and the bad and the ugly from every person in this town. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Rick Young. How you doing, Rick?
Good evening. I have a short statement and a comment this evening, and I want to always be thankful for the opportunity to speak freely in the public setting, especially in this hallowed chamber where my father and my brother have served. And this is my community, and I'm proud of my community. I'm going to do everything I can to make it better. As the predicted tectonic paradigm shift continues for Shawnee, Oklahoma, aka Shawnee, America, we are at another inflection point in our municipality, namely of a charter change for the good of the whole and for true representative government in our municipality. That's what we're going to address tonight, and with the affirmative vote, I do believe that we will do the right things for such time as this, of, by, and for the people, also known as stakeholders and not kiddos. So we respect everybody that's here tonight. I think all of us are of age. We're in an adult setting. We should conduct ourselves accordingly. Charter change will not solve all of our challenges, but is an honest beginning. And this is the reason I'm here. And a lot of people, if you talk with me even 5 minutes, I will tell you to build bridges and repair breaches that have begun in earnest in our community. For those 7 people that are before me that sat behind the dais, you are volunteers, non-paid, and I appreciate that. I know you have staff members that assist you in the things that you're doing, and we appreciate them also. So my hope is that with our affirmative vote tonight, it will buttress this sentiment that we are exercising. And I know once it leaves this chamber, it's in the hands of the voters and in the hands of the governor. And we have to do a very good job of educating the populace of what we're doing. Now, at the same time, if you look at the 7 propositions, you might need an attorney to figure it out. At the same time, as I said here a few years ago, we had the same type 7 propositions that was before the people, and we whipped, or we missed the free throw. And the results were as we see them today in what we have before. So I want to encourage you to follow your intuition and those things that are going on in the community. There are challenges. I don't see them as problems. They can be overcome. And so I thank you for this time.
Thank you, sir. All righty. Item 2 is consider approval of the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to have pulled off of there? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 2.
Second.
Alrighty. Darren. Okay, we have a motion.
I,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did have something. I was looking through.
Oh, okay.
We can have discussion, right?
Hang on just a second. What's that? We have,
We can have discussion then with a motion and a second.
can.
right?
That's good.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. It's more just about item G, the South Central contract. Is that part of the, am I reading that right? Is that part of the consent agenda? Okay. It's a new view, so, on the computer. Let me find my questions. The plans for Woodland Veterans Park had a structure on it that was a bathroom structure. Is that gonna be added once it's opened up in the fall, like for janitorial services? That was one of my questions. Because right now it doesn't have the asterisk next to it for janitorial services, but it's got a structure, a bathroom structure on it.
I would just,
That will most likely be included. I think the timing is such that by the time we get Woodland Veterans Park completely done, this will only carry us through the current season. It's not a full year contract.
Okay. On number, I guess under there for number 2, the 6,500 a month, is that for the whole scope, all of the facilities? Is it the pay for anybody who works on the parks? Is it under number 3, it says like job coach and 2 people, is that just 3 people doing all the parks? Okay, so that 67 is for them and all the parks. Okay.
you got all the questions answered?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion and a second for approval of item 2. So we will call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Okay, motion 3, we have a Mayor's Proclamation, American Red Cross Month, so I will come up, and as I guess Lloyd is here, I think I saw her, we will do that. I'm gonna bring this, oh, I'm sorry, we have one other bit of business. It was the bid opening. So staff will be opening the bids in the lobby, so if anybody has interest in watching that, there he goes. So you can go witness the bid opening, and we'll let them clear out. I apologize. All right, now we will get to our proclamation. I'm gonna bring this because we'll get one right on the heels of that. I'll be right down there. Thank you, ma'am. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. We're juggling our new technology, so we'll get through it. So we've got American Red Cross Month. Whereas March is American Red Cross Month, a special time to recognize and thank our everyday heroes, those who perform extraordinary acts of service by reaching out to help people in need. And whereas over 141 years, the American Red Cross, through its strong network of volunteers, donors, and partners, is always there in times of need to protect life and health and to ensure respect for all people. And whereas the American Red Cross does not discriminate as to nationality, race, religious beliefs, class, or potential opinions, It endeavors to relieve the suffering of individuals being guided solely by their needs and to give priority to the most urgent cases of distress. And whereas we would like to remember our heroes here in Shawnee who work tirelessly and help in time of disaster, and someone who needs life-saving blood or the comfort of a helping hand, they provide round-the-clock support to members of the military, veterans, and their families, and teach life-saving classes in CPR, aquatic safety, and first aid. And whereas across the country and around the world, the American Red Cross responds to disasters, including the most recent tornadoes in Oklahoma, and more specifically in Pottawatomie County, ready to provide food, shelter, and emergency supplies. And whereas we dedicate the month of March to all of those who support the American Red Cross mission to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies. Our community depends on the American Red Cross, which relies on the donations of time, money, and blood to fulfill its humanitarian mission. Now therefore, I, Ed Bolt, Mayor of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, by the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the month of March 2023 to be American Red Cross Month. And I will give that to you, Loida. And thank you so much for all that you do for all of us. We wouldn't want to be here without you, that's for sure. You guys are a big help every time something bad happens, and we appreciate you for that.
Well, we appreciate the community and all of our volunteers who work tirelessly 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter whenever there's a disaster. So,
Well, thank you so much. Another proclamation. This one is for National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And Christina. So, Christina Brown, how are you?
Hi, Mary.
It's good to see you. So we've got National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. Whereas every year since 1981, the second week of April has been set aside to honor telecommunications personnel in the public safety community who dedicate their lives to serving the public. And whereas emergencies can occur at any time and require police, fire, and emergency medical services, when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the City of Shawnee. And whereas the public safety telecommunicators of the City of Shawnee processed 29,287 calls to 911 and dispatched 66,406 units for service, and the details of those calls are critical to the emergency personnel who respond. Public safety telecommunicators work to establish an accurate location and other vital information necessary for a prompt and prepared emergency response for the safety of emergency personnel. And whereas over the past year, public safety telecommunicators of the City of Shawnee Communication Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, the suppression of fires, and the treatment of patients while exhibiting compassion, understanding, and professionalism during their performance. And whereas it is fitting and proper that we formally recognize the City of Shawnee's public safety telecommunicators and the public safety telecommunicators throughout Pottawatomie County for the work they do every day to protect our community. Their diligent efforts ensure that help is on the way when our citizens need it most. Now therefore, I, Ed Bolt, Mayor of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, by the authority vested in me, do hereby proclaim the week of April 9 through 15, 2023, to be National Safety Telecommunications Week. There you go. And
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate what you guys do to keep us all safe and get us help when we need it. Okay, item 4 is declaration that an emergency exists pursuant to 61 OS 130 and authorization for an emergency repair of a wastewater main on Chicago Street between Broadway Avenue and Bell Avenue in an amount not to exceed $72,400. Mr. Schmidt, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you, Mr. Mayor?
Doing great.
So this is very similar to the stormwater issue that we experienced on Dewey Street this past September. Staff is trying to keep it from overflowing and causing potential hazard, health hazard in the homes and the streets in that area. The sewer line is an old clay line that is collapsed, and it's not allowing flow. We reached out to a total of 11 contractors and only 2 returned a bid. The bid did come in over the 50,000 threshold. With the staff time and resources it's taking to keep that line clear, and then the time wasted of opening up, putting it out for bid, we're opening up ourselves to a potential health hazard. We received 2 bids, one from Jordan Contractors for the $72,400, and then we received the second bid was from Kraft Reynolds in the amount of $91,635.
All right. Questions?
And there was a snippet of the video that was taken that should have been included in the packet, so you can see what we're up against.
Okay. Anybody got questions for Brad? If not, do we have a motion? Thank you, ma'am.
I'll second.
Thank you, sir. All righty. We have a motion and a second for approval of item 4. We'll call the question.
I didn't get a thing.
It didn't pop up there.
I'll just take your verbal vote, Commissioner Flood.
Yes.
Did it? Okay, very good. Motion passes 7-0. Item 5. Consideration of an ordinance of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, amending the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 3, Section 2, Article 14, Section 3, Article 14, Section 5, to provide for ward-specific voting, amending the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 15, Section 2, regarding the competitive bidding requirements comporting to state law, amending the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 3, Section 4, and Article 3, Section 6, to establish the timing of the swearing in of the mayor and commissioners, repealing the charter of the City of Shawnee, Article 5, Section 8, to remove residency and citizenship qualification requirements for city employees, amending the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 16, Section 1, to clarify the rules regarding the conflict of interest policy for commissioners and city employees or officers to comport with state law, repealing the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 9, Section 1, which pertains to Shawnee Twin Lakes regulations, which already exist within city ordinances and resolutions, amending the charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 12, Section 6B, clarifying the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund shall follow all applicable state law, and also providing for severability, codification, and repealer. And Madam City Manager, how are you this evening?
Wonderful. How are you this evening?
Doing great.
The municipal charter we have is our foundational document that governs us, that describes how we are structured, what functions we have, and also how we run this city. It is comparable to the Constitution of the U.S. in its functionality, same as a state constitution as well. So this is a very, very important agenda item, as is the next one. In Oklahoma, any city or town over 2,000, to which of course we belong, is allowed to have a charter. And the City of Shawnee adopted its own charter, its first charter, in 1908. Since that time, we've updated and amended our charter multiple times. This one is yet another update and amendment. There are two very locally specific charter amendments that we would like to propose with this ordinance, which is, of course, the first proposition, ward-specific voting, and then also proposition number 3, the clarification of the new start date for newly elected mayor and commissioner. The other propositions 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are more of a house cleaning item. In some cases, we would like to emulate the state or federal law. In other cases, such as Proposition 6 for Shawnee Twin Lakes, we have, since this charter section was put in place, we have since updated city codes that have taken over the functionality of governing those recreational uses. And right now, we do not want to create a conflict with different charter language than we have in the city code. So allow me to just quickly run through all of the propositions. I will not read everything in detail because I know that the ordinance itself lays out what this amended charter language would be. Proposition 1, again, that is a local topic, ward-specific voting for commissioners. If approved, registered voters residing in the individual ward will have that opportunity to vote for the commissioner they wish to represent the specific ward. Proposition 2 is streamlining our competitive bidding process. If approved, this amendment will align the city's competitive bidding requirements with those required by Oklahoma state law. Proposition 3, again, that is a local item, clarifying the start date for newly elected mayor and commissioners. If approved, this amendment will adjust the term of office for a newly elected official to start on the first regularly scheduled city commission meeting following the election. So even if it was to fall on a Tuesday because we have a Monday holiday, that'd still be okay. Proposition 4, updating requirements for city employees. At this time, there's a conflict with state and federal employment law. If approved, this amendment would expand employment prospects and align the city's employment requirements with both state and federal laws. Proposition 5, aligning conflict of interest policies. If approved, this amendment will align the city's requirements for commissioners, city officers, and employees with those established by state law. Proposition 6, updating the recreational use policy for the Shawnee Twin Lakes. Again, right now, there is this language in the charter. We already have updated city codes. If approved, this amendment will align the charter with the adopted city codes regulating those recreational uses at the Shawnee Twin Lakes. And Proposition 7, updating the policy for our cemetery perpetual care fund. If approved, this amendment will align our charter with state law regarding the management of the perpetual care fund for the Fairview Cemetery. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions?
I had one thing to point out. On the ordinance itself, in the first whereas, I think there might be a typo. In response to requests from citizens.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
That's the only one I found so far. The other day.
Knowing what it should have said, I'm probably read over this at least 20 different times.
Any other questions?
Just to confirm, each one of these will be an individual vote. It will not be a one vote for all.
That is correct.
Okay.
And that will become much clearer with the next agenda item, where the actual resolution for the special election. It will show that each one of these will be its own separate question.
Are we planning educational pieces or?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, on the back table, and there are frequently asked questions. I just checked this link. We did not hit the link button, the go live button yet, but I will do so as soon as the meeting is over. I will go back to my office and hit publish. There is a much larger FAQ. There are actually 55 questions that we have compiled thus far, but if there are additional questions that come in beyond those that have already been asked, we will add those, so it will be a living and ongoing thing. We also have educational materials. I briefly spoke with the mayor just on the drive back to Shawnee. There is a presentation that city staff would be happy to give to any civic group, anybody interested in this particular topic.
Anybody got any other questions? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve item 5.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Daniel and Travis. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 5. We will call the question.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, oh,
you
you
were
got a lot
trying
to
to spare
read.
me, but I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah,
and read
because
it.
you've got a bunch to read. I'm sorry.
Ordinance title into the record, thank you. An ordinance of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, amending the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 3, Section 2, Article 14, Section 3, Article 14, Section 5, to provide for ward-specific voting, amending the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 15, Section 2, regarding the competitive bidding requirements comporting to state law, amending the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 3, Section 4, and Article 3, Section 6, to establish the timing for the swearing-in of the mayor and commissioners, repealing the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 5, Section 8, to remove residency and citizenship qualification requirements for city employees, amending the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 16, Section 1, to clarify the rules regarding conflict of interest policy for commissioners and city employees or officers to comport with state law, repealing the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 9, Section 1, which pertains to the Shawnee Twin Lakes regulations, which already exist within city ordinances and resolutions, amending the Charter of the City of Shawnee, Oklahoma, Article 12, Section 6B, clarifying the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund shall follow all applicable state law, and also providing for severability, codification, and repealer.
Thank you, sir. Okay. We will now call the question. There it is.
Maybe leave the meeting and come back.
Yes.
So I'm asking you to say, if you have to scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, you go scroll down.
Okay.
Just not
That's the first one we had like that's been that long. There we go, okay. Motion carried 7-0. Item 6, consider and take action with respect to a resolution authorizing the calling and holding of a special election in the city of Shawnee, Oklahoma, state of Oklahoma, the city, on the 13th day of June 2023 for the purpose of submitting to the registered qualified electors of said city the questions of approval or rejection of an ordinance of the city relating to city charter amendments as more specifically set out in an ordinance of said city and containing other provisions related thereto. And Andrea's back up.
As you can see from the resolution itself, each one of the propositions will have its own yes or no question. There is some additional information I would like to share with you. If approved, these charter amendments would not immediately go into effect. Upon approval, those charter amendments that have received the approval of the voters would be sent to the governor for his review and approval, and only after receiving gubernatorial approval would those sections then become our new charter.
Okay, any other questions?
Do we have an idea of the timetable once it lands on the governor's end?
We have been checking on other cities' charter amendments, and in some cases, they were approved within 3 months, and in other cases, it has taken over a year. So we do not know.
Anybody got any other questions? Okay, no questions. Do we have a motion?
So I'll make a motion to approve item 6.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Travis and Darren. Okay, you got a bunch of reading.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution authorizing the calling and holding of a special election in the city of Shawnee, Oklahoma on Tuesday, the 13th day of June, 2023, for the purpose of submitting to the registered qualified voters of said city the question of whether ordinance number 2781 NS, which amends Article 3, Section 2 and Article 14, Sections 3 and 5 of the Charter of the city of Shawnee, by limiting the electorate for commissioners to the qualified voters residing in each commissioner's specific ward, which amends Article 15, Section 2 of the Charter of the City of Shawnee by stating the City of Shawnee shall follow all applicable state laws regarding competitive bidding requirements, which amends Article 3, Sections 4 and 6 of the Charter of the City of Shawnee to state when the term shall begin for newly elected mayor and commissioners, which amends Article 5, Section 8 of the Charter of the City of Shawnee, which relates to residency and qualifications requirements of city employees, which repeals and replaces Article 16, Section 1 of the Charter of the City of Shawnee related to conflict of interest policies for commissioners, city employees, and city officers, which repeals Article 9, Section 1 of the Charter of the City of Shawnee to remove provisions regulating recreational use of the Shawnee Twin Lakes, which repeals and replaces Article 12, Section 6B of the Charter of the City of Shawnee to follow state law regarding the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, and providing for said election to be conducted by the Pottawatomie County Election Board, providing that polls shall be open continuously from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., providing for severability.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 6. We will call the question.
Yes.
And motion passes 7-0. Item 7, consideration of resolution updating the city fee schedule by setting setting the water rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections A and B, Section 26-6, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code, and 2, setting the sanitary sewer rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside city limits pursuant to subsections B and C, Section 26 through 27, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code of the City of Shawnee, and amend residential deposit rates in Section 26-132A, Article 3, Division 2, Subdivision 2 of Chapter 26 of the City Code. And our city clerk, Lisa, is up.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. By resolution, the city may conduct an annual review of its water and sewer rates and consider adjustments per the Consumer Price Index for both residential and commercial accounts. City staff looked at CPI for water and sewer maintenance, and we also looked at CPI for ancillary costs such as motor fuel, new trucks, parks and equipment. And we would like to request a CPI increase of 6.5%. 6.5% is the overall CPI for all categories. And it would allow us to maintain the ancillary costs that go into providing water and sewer services. Our minimum bill, let me see where it's at, would go up from, our minimum bill is $68.91 currently. It would go to $72.21, which is a difference of $3.30. And that does include sanitation increase, which will be the next item.
Okay. So that does include that?
The minimum bill does include the sanitation
Okay.
increase, yes.
Okay, very good.
Do you have any questions?
Questions? Let's see, any, I know when I very first came on the commission, we'd been a number of years where they went without doing that, and then we had to do a really big increase, and at that time, we decided we'd do this on an annual basis.
Yes.
So it'd be less painful for people, and no one likes their bill to go up, but it's sure better than getting hit with a big one a couple of years down the road, especially the way the inflation rate's been lately.
Yes, we would like to avoid that.
Yeah. Any other questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 7.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Darren and Mark. All right, you're up again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution updating the city fee schedule by 1, setting the water rates for residential and commercial use both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections A and B, Section 26-26, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code, and 2, setting the sanitary sewer rates for residential and commercial use both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections B and C, Section 26-27, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the Code of the City of Shawnee.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 7. We'll call the question.
Commissioner Flood?
Yes.
And motion passes 6 in favor and 1 against. Moving on to item 8, consideration of a resolution updating the city fee schedule by setting the monthly rates and fees for solid waste services pursuant to subsections A, Section 23 through 38, Article 2, Chapter 23 of the City Code, and providing for readoption of the city fee schedule in whole. And Ms. Lacion is up again.
Yes, thank you. So in 2020, we entered a new contract with Central Disposal, and in the request for production, it allowed for us to look at the consumer price index for sanitation services each year. Central has requested to increase by 3.5% per CPI. They are capped at 3.5%. The actual CPI for sanitation is 4.9%. This would increase our current large polycart, which is a 95-gallon, is $22.57, and it would increase to $23.36, which is 79 cents. Small polycart would go from $17.91 to $18.54, which is 63 cents. Staff does recommend approval of this item. If you have any questions.
Any questions?
The way I read the contract, we really don't have a choice.
Correct.
And that it increases yearly, and they send their request up to 3.5%, which is actually,
Yes.
as you said, lower than
Yeah.
their industry. So we're saving a little bit in that regard
Correct.
than if we did a straight CPI.
Any questions or comments? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 8.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have a motion, a second. You're up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution updating the city fee schedule by setting the monthly rates and fees for solid waste services pursuant to subsection A, Section 23-38, Article 2, Chapter 23 of the City Code, and providing for the readoption of the city fee schedule in whole.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 8. We'll call that question.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 in favor and 1 against. Item 9, we have a public hearing and consideration of an ordinance to detach the following described property from City of Shawnee located within Potawatomi County, State of Oklahoma, to wit, Tract A beginning at the southwest corner of Northeast 4 of said Section 20, thence 89
Mr.
degrees. I'm sorry.
I meant to tell you this before the meeting. I did
Yes,
the
sir.
research. Once you've identified the section township range, we can bypass the meets and bounds.
Okey dokey.
So we have 3 tracks within this agenda item. You've just listed Tract A. If you'd like to go to Tract B and give us the section township range, and the same with C, and that would be sufficient.
And let me find those. So Tract B says beginning at the southeast corner of said Northeast 4. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
the only portion I need there?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. And Tract C.
Tract C
Okay,
is.
Tract C is beginning at the southeast corner. We got a typo there. Southeast corner of said Northeast 4.
Yep.
All right, thank you, sir. All righty, and you were up, I believe.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. This item comes before you on a petition that has been submitted to the city for the detachment of 3 tracts of property, which were listed in the agenda item. Those tracts are identified within the agenda packet. The petition is submitted and was submitted in the same manner that previous petitions for detachment have been submitted to this body. But it did prompt additional review by City Attorney's Office and by staff when we received this particular petition based upon some discrepancies that we found in previous detachment petitions. In review of that, and you've been provided in the notice of detachment and in your memo, an outline of the relevant law. But the specific provision that has given concern to staff is contained in 11 OS section 21-110A2, which provides that territory may be detached from corporate limits of a municipality by the governing body when A, the petition for detachment signed by at least 3/4 of the registered voters and by the owners of at least 3/4 in value of the property to be detached is filed with the governing body. I want to emphasize a couple of things. First, that is a requirement to bring it before this body. It is not a requirement of this body if those conditions are met to detach. But we have been examining the sufficiency of the petition to detach. And again, I want to emphasize, and in the public comment, I expect that counsel for the petitioners will address this. This petition was submitted in the same fashion that prior petitions have been submitted that have been found to be sufficient. What staff is concerned about is that we are seeing more of these. And in looking at how this has been handled historically, we have not been consistent. Therefore, we are seeking additional guidance at this time, which is why, out of an abundance of caution, we have deemed the current petition insufficient. And that is why there's not an ordinance before this body today to either accept or deny the detachment. That does not mean that that ordinance would not come at next month's meeting. Again, we are working with resources at the state level and potentially even considering asking for guidance from the district court to ensure that we do this correctly. We want to make sure that the precedent that is created is the correct precedent. So this is not a situation where staff is coming out and saying that this petition is wrong. What we're saying is we need to make sure we're doing it right, and we're going to take the time to do that before we put it before this body. With that being said, we are required by statute to go forward with the public hearing, and that is about to occur. Staff's recommendation at this point would be not to vote to approve a detachment. However, we are not ruling out the possibility of that coming back before this board, most likely next month in the form of an ordinance. At that point in time, it will be up to the commission whether or not you believe that it would be appropriate to detach the property as has been petitioned. And with that, I would entertain any questions that you may have.
Questions? Make sure everybody's okay. Lauren, you okay?
I see several of you flipping through a packet that you've been provided that I believe Mr. Brackeen, when he has his opportunity to speak in public comment, will reference documents contained therein. I referenced a few of those. He's included examples of prior petitions for detachment that have been submitted in similar format, and including ordinances that have been passed as a result of petitions for detachment that have been submitted in similar format. And so I don't think that should come as a surprise when you hear that from council, but
Anybody have questions for Joe? Well, I've got him here before we open the hearing. No. Okay. Seeing none, I guess we will open the public hearing.
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. So then, is there anybody here that would like to speak in favor? How are you, sir?
I'm all right. How are you all doing?
Doing great.
So my name is Craig Breckine, and I am here representing the petitioners that filed this petition for detachment, George Knox, Serena Stiles, and Lewis and Emily Cox. And I'd like to start off with just a brief, I'd call it an anecdote, but it's an actual story that happened in this situation. One of my clients purchased property, 9 acres. That's one of the tracts in this petition. Nothing on the property. Wants to begin the process of working with her property, maybe eventually build a house. No address. How do you tell somebody how to go to your property, to a contractor to work on your property without an address? Contact the city, right? Give me an address. City tells her to contact the county to get her address. So she does. The next step she decides to take is to apply for a water well permit, which she does. The city denies her water well permit because she has illegally obtained a 911 address. So that's her first interaction with the city of Shawnee. It took her weeks to get an approval for a water well at her property. Now I want you to think about this. The city does not provide services at the property. So there is no city water, and the city is saying you can't have a water well either. The city, if it sounds like it, is looking for ways to say no. That's what they're doing. Each one of my clients, who are mostly on this side of the room over here, has a story like that. These people did not purchase land looking to detach. This was a city-created, self-made problem that they eventually wound up in my office and said, what are our options? And we discussed detachment. So Joe has laid it out. We filed our petition for detachment, and the basis for that detachment is found in page 18 of the packet that I sent you all. And it's 11 OS, Title 11 OS 21103. And we're looking at subsection D. And this is actually talking about when the city annexes the property, attaches it. And Part D down there talks about when the city attaches the property, they're supposed to have a plan to provide services to that property. And if they don't, if there's no plan included in the original ordinance, the statute implies a 10-year time limit to get those plans provided. That's what we have here. This property was annexed 60 years ago. So we are a little bit outside of the 10-year window, of which no city services have been provided. I'm not going to read the whole statute, but the last line on that page, on page 18, it says, if municipality services are not substantially complete within the prescribed time, then the territory shall be detached. In law, we have a lot of different words we use, but may and shall are big ones. May means you get the right to do something. You're not obligated to do it. Shall is an obligation. This is an obligation. This means you have an obligation to detach the territory. So the only things you have to ask yourself at this point is, has something triggered that obligation? Our petition has triggered that obligation. The petition that we have set before you today has triggered your obligation to detach this 50 acres or so. And so it references back, the top of the next page talks about 11 OS 21-110, which Joe just talked about, which I've got on page 13 of my packet that I shared with you all. So if all we're deciding is there been something that has triggered your obligation to detach, let's go back and look at the statute that says, what do we have to do? How do we have to fulfill that obligation? And so it says, territory may be detached from the corporate limits of a municipality by the governing body when an ordinance can do it. Obviously, you all, as a governing body, can detach it by ordinance if you want to, without a petition from your citizens. Or a petition requesting detachment. Well, we've got one of those. The question is it sufficient? Now, city staff is trying to create, that's the operative word here, vagueness, create vagueness, because there is no vagueness. A petition signed by at least 3/4 of the registered voters and by the owners of at least 3/4 in value of the property to be detached. Now, the first time I read that, I thought the people that are trying to detach, you got to file a petition. And I'm willing to bet that 95% of the people in this room read it the same way. Now, they're wanting you not to take a plain reading of the statute, they're actually wanting you to insert wording into the statute, which would say 3/4 of the registered voters of the city of Shawnee and 3/4 of the owners in value have to sign this petition. But don't just listen to me arguing up here, because I'm obviously going to advocate for my clients. If you look at Title 11, which is what governs cities and towns, whether you know it or not, you're driven by it almost every time you meet, and our past actions as a city have never required an additional 20,000 signatures to a petition for detachment, which is what they're saying is required. So if you look at page 15 of the packet, I only included this because this is from our own ordinances. It's the exact same from the statute. And to me, it makes it even clearer what it's requiring. A petition requesting detachment signed by at least 3/4 of the registered voters and by the owners of at least 3/4 of the property to be detached. Again, they're asking you to insert language that simply is not there. But let's not stop there. If you flip over to the next page, page 16, again, we're just sticking in Title 11 here, which is the cities and towns ordinance title of our statutes. It's talking about annexing property. So if owners and people living outside of the city limits wanted to petition this body to be annexed, if you read those first two lines to me, of that statute, it seems to be making it pretty clear in different language that the people within those limits, outside of your city limits, are the ones that have to petition. They don't have to get 3/4 of the registered voters in the city of Shawnee to join their petition. It says at least 3/4 of the registered voters and the owners of at least 3/4 in value of the property in any territory adjacent or contiguous to the municipality may request annexation by signing a petition, and it goes on. So again, it's making clear that it's within the property that's seeking attachment. But by trying to create this vagueness, the city staff is trying to say, well, if they wanted to turn around and detach, well, now they got to go ask for 75% of the registered voters for permission on their petition before they can do that. It doesn't hold water. And now I'm going to really quickly run through a few points in Title 11 where it actually does require a petition presented to the city be signed by registered voters of the city of Shawnee. Page 21 is talking about proposing amendments to our charter, which I think we were talking about here. The citizens can petition to have that changed. Sounds like a big deal. You only have to have 25% of the registered voters join in a petition to present to this body. Page 22 talks about that procedure. Again, it mentions the 25% threshold. Page 23 talks about a petitioning for creating recreation programs within our city. 5% of the registered voters have to join that petition. Pages 24 and 26 talk about creating a town. So if you're a group of citizens out in the county that want to create a town, you only need 35% to petition the county commissioners to create a town. Petitioning for a referendum, 25%. Petitioning the Board of Trustees, 20%. These are all page 28, page 30. And in each one of these instances, they always specifically mention of the votes cast at the most recent election, in a general election, right? Because the statute is asking the general public to go out and do a massive undertaking, and so it's giving very specific instructions. Additionally, 3/4, 75%, would be more than any other statutory requirement found in all of Title 11. So you must accept that it would be easier to propose for a citizen changes to our charter than to detach 5 acres of property on the outskirts of our town. So if we look at historically, I'm just going to touch on 2 quick times. About 9 or 10 years ago, I'm sure most of you remember, there was quite an argument over a lot of land being detached. And the petition that was presented for that detachment certainly was not signed by 75% of the voters in the city of Shawnee. But as a lot of the sitting commissioners at the time were ousted and more commissioners were coming in, as a last gasp to try to prevent that land from being detached, the commissioners at the time proposed a new ordinance. And if you flip over to page 32 of my packet, the ordinance they proposed was any detachments have to be approved by the people of the city of Shawnee. And so there's certainly never been any thought process by anybody, and there's been a lot of smart people run through these doors, that 20,000 people needed to sign off on a petition for detachment. 2 years ago, 4 of you sitting in those chairs voted to detach 40 acres in this exact same situation. Nobody said, where are the other 20,000 signatures we need? Nobody even thought to ask the question because the language in the statute is clear. Now, the city is concerned because city staff is concerned. I don't know what you all are concerned about. Is concerned because there's a lot of land out by the lake that is potentially in the same situation. And so they're trying to create some roadblocks, but this is not one of them. And so you know, whether there's an ordinance proposed tonight or not, I don't know. Whether you all decide to defer or not tonight, I don't know. But you cannot be denied on the basis of insufficiency. And I think all 7 of you can read the information in front of you and see that. And so once you decide that and know that the property meets this burden of the services haven't been provided, have we been triggered as far as our obligation to detach? So as good wards of the citizens of Shawnee's taxpayer dollars, you should not be dragging this issue out. This is a clean-cut issue. The property should be voted to be detached, and you should move on to the next issue, which is, you got a whole list of agenda items, but as far as keeping this from happening again, that should be your focus, not creating, you know, these types of roadblocks. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody have questions for him?
Or any questions?
I may have one, and
Go ahead.
Joe, you can redirect me if it's to the wrong person. I find your legal arguments compelling. I guess my question would be on behalf of your clients. I don't see an ordinance for us to vote on, so we can't pull it out of thin air with open meetings and things that we have to publish. I know you're advocating for your clients, but what would you see as the remedy that we could do tonight? Like where I sit right now is I find your presentation compelling, but outside of awful harm to your clients in waiting 30 days, I don't see a deferral as a negative action. I see it as maybe a necessary action, because I don't see an ordinance that was posted for us to vote on.
So
I'm wondering, no matter how compelling I find your argument, I'm not sure I have anything to.
So I think that is probably going to be a better question for Joe. If you all said, hey, we're inclined to vote to approve the detachment, what are our options right now if we wanted to do that?
Well,
that would be a better question for Joe.
I would maybe rephrase your question, and I appreciate your phrasing it in an advocacy for your clients. Joe, not tipping my hand as to how I'm inclined to vote, what are the options of the commission tonight?
If they considered that even as an option, is what I'm,
Again, and to the extent I wasn't clear, I apologize, but at this point, out of an abundance of caution, we have determined the petition to be insufficient. We are not saying that we will remain with that position, and each and every one of you has the ability to request that the ordinance be placed on the next agenda, regardless of what staff's position may or may not be at that point in time. And so I think, to answer your question bluntly, I don't think that there's any relief that can be granted tonight. We're meeting our statutory requirement for a public hearing. However, any one of the commission or any group of the commission could request that be placed on, and it has not been ruled out that staff will not place it there of its own volition.
This probably isn't you, but you're welcome to stay as we can. Does it matter at all that none of the voters are residents of the city of Shawnee as I read it? Maybe they are.
It is a concern.
Is that a clarification point we need?
That's absolutely a clarification point we need, and it's one that we've not found any guidance with regard to. And just for clarity for the rest of the commission, I know it's in the memo, but Mr. Brackeen's clients, none of them are registered voters in the city of Shawnee. They all live elsewhere. And so that does create a bit of a 75% of zero is still zero, which creates an argument for Mr. Brackeen, but also an interesting argument for the city of Shawnee. And I want to be clear here, this is not a position, and Mr. Brackeen has laid out a good case, but at the same time, his advocacy has taken this to a place where staff or some subset of the city is against his clients or against detachment, and that's simply not the case. We are for the procedure being proper, and we have to undertake these reviews, and there are times when we undertake these reviews where we find nits that cause us to dig deeper than we have before, and this is just one of those circumstances.
One question I have, if we did wait a month, I mean, is that going to cause your clients any harm?
Well, I think some of them would say yes. They've been waiting and their preference.
No, I understand that part.
They have stuff that they would rather move on to get done.
Sure.
But not, the worst harm wouldn't be not getting anything done at all. So, I mean, I think, does that answer your question?
It does. I just wanted to ask because I know others are probably thinking the same thing, so. Any other questions for Craig or we going?
I think my concern is, I mean, if I 100% agree with Mr. Brackeen, I don't see much that we can do tonight. If in the affirmative, the negative, I mean, that's my reading of where we are, and I think your case is fairly compelling. I don't see, so someone's gonna have to tell me where I'm.
Yeah.
I don't see the vehicle to carry us where you want us to go tonight, even if we say, let's hop in the car and go together. That's my reading of where we are.
The statute, in my opinion, says, once presented with the petition, you all have the right to approve, deny, or defer. And so I don't understand why you all could not vote to approve the petition as presented. You all may have to take further action based on that approval, but that's my opinion. The statute very clearly says, once presented with the petition, which you have been, we're having a public hearing on it right now, you all have the right to approve, deny, defer.
And I was going to ask if we had anyone else want to speak in favor,
This is
so I'm
one
going
of
to
my
let you take
clients,
your
so-
turn.
Yes, that was just
No.
my question, is
No,
why
no.
can't one of you make the motion to go ahead and vote on this tonight?
Well, we're still having the public hearing, so I mean, that will come shortly, right after the public hearing. A motion one way or the other. Was there any, but if you want to speak in favor of, you're entitled to do that now.
I think Mr. Brackeen has laid out our legal rights pretty clearly, that services have not been provided and they were required to be provided. And so we have the legal right to be detached. Y'all have the legal obligation to vote on that detachment based off the legal petition we have provided.
Okay,
That's where I
very
stand.
good. Has anyone got any questions for her? We've got her. And yes, sir, I understand you're wanting to speak next.
Yes,
so-
I'm one of the,
Absolutely, come on up and please let them have your name. So-
George Knox. Just to address some of his
Yes, sir.
questions that he had. Two of the three of us who have tried to actually develop the property have came to the city, requested the permits, done everything that we were supposed to do to work with the city to make it happen. I was even told by someone at the city that if I don't do what he tells me, then I'll never build anything in Shawnee again. So that's the things that kick this kind of stuff off. And when it comes to what are the immediate needs or what could be the pain that it causes us to wait 30 days, when you're building a house, do you understand how interest rates affect what your house payment's going to be? The material costs that go into it? I started this back in April. Was the first time that I ran into an issue. Do you know what interest rates have done since April?
Yeah, we all know too well.
On my projected budget in this time period, my payment is made, it has increased $585 a month, to the point where I'm almost not even able to build what I have plans for and have designed.
Right.
So yes, every single day that this gets drug on, when people have done it in the past, when this council has approved it with exactly the same applications that we've done, yes, there is a problem with it. And we don't want to be the example that you make to try to stop other people from being able to do this.
I want to make sure that, see if anybody has any questions for you. I guess not. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Discussion up here.
I mean, we, as a group, probably need to depend on our legal counsel, his recommendation. I understand where they're coming from, but I think at some point we got to go through the process.
Questions, comments?
May I, Mr. Mayor, provide a few
Yes, sir.
clarifications?
Absolutely.
So, Commissioner Seahorn is correct. I mean, the recommendation of staff and council is to defer it, which, as Mr. Brackeen pointed out, is the statutory right of this commission, along with approval or denial. We've laid out the reasons for that deferral. I do think there's a few comments that have been made that bear clarification, and I'll kind of work backwards. The applicant that spoke last discussed the potential harm. No part of this detachment prevents construction. I want to be very, very clear about that. This house could have been being built the entire time. Anybody is entitled to build within the city of Shawnee as long as they go through the proper permit process. If those permits are not approved for whatever reason because of our city code, that's a different scenario altogether and outside of this consideration. And I think that we've got to be careful not to be mixing issues in this particular instance. So while I certainly feel for the gentleman and I understand the frustration, I don't believe that that is a consideration when we're talking about this specific issue, because there's nothing that would bar construction of an appropriate permitted structure on this property, whether it's April, May, June, or today. The other piece, and again, Mr. Brackeen has laid out compelling arguments, and these are arguments that I've heard and listened to before tonight, and these are arguments that we're running down, which is why we're asking for a deferral. But he brings before you a lot of statutes outside of the statute that matters, and talks about requirements in different statutes. We don't read them together. We read this statute as it stands. And if the legislature put in an onerous requirement here, made a mistake, whatever it may be, that statute stands alone with regard to our interpretation. And so just because elsewhere within Title 11 there may be different requirements, doesn't mean that it changes the correct interpretation of this particular one. The next piece is he has implored you to be the judge, to interpret this statute. And I think Commissioner Seahorn is correct. That's not your guys' job. Candidly speaking, it's not mine either. I'm to advise you as to what I think may happen, but a judge is the only one that can make those determinations. It's not Mr. Brackeen, it's not me, it's not this body. And so that is why we are taking the time to work through this, to find authority that brings clarity and definitive authority to this scenario. Ultimately, whether I think it's ambiguous, the mayor thinks it's ambiguous, Mr. Brackeen or his clients think it's ambiguous, doesn't matter. We have to get it right, and we have to do so based upon what the legislature intended. I think with that in mind, that's the basis for the request to defer this. Again, we've laid out the fact that it is likely this ordinance will come before this body at a future date, but we want to, again, be absolutely certain with regard to the sufficiency. I didn't touch on whether or not this commission would be required to detach if the petition meets the sufficiency requirements. Mr. Brackeen did touch on that. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think he's given you the proper statute. I think that was the only other issue that was not previously addressed.
I have one. I think it doesn't deal with sufficiency, or maybe it does, and you can tell me why. See if I get it right. 1121-103 under D, where it talks about the 10-year time plan. I mean, to me, the case is pretty compelling that it says shall be detached. So even if I have questions about if we have a vehicle to do it tonight, because, like, even if we found this petition to be insufficient, and let's say that's right, legislators made an error, which won't comment on that. But if that petition is insufficient, this line holds us, in my amateur legal view. Except, would they have to file a, I mean, I'm guessing, what vehicle would an applicant use to enforce the shall?
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
If they can't meet the 75% threshold, legislators screwed up. It is 75% of all Shawnee residents required for a detachment petition. We say whether we've screwed it up before or not, we're gonna be right, which I think is what we should do. We still have a legal issue in my mind on this shall be detached. So how do we bring the two together?
Sure. So I would answer that by saying this is really a two-step process. Is the petition sufficient? And if it's not, you don't even get to that question. If it is sufficient, then I think the arguments that have been made, as you have stated, are very compelling.
So then I guess my question would be, and can someone correct me, we just got this? Like, I haven't seen this. Was it in my this packet?
Well,
and I
that
missed
was
it?
a technological boo-boo.
I mean, this packet isn't here.
Correct.
So this is my first reading of it.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
It was submitted in advance with the intention of you having it ahead of time, but.
Correct. Okay, that's fine. So, I mean, this isn't like just now giving it attention, it's just seeing it.
Correct.
I understand what you're saying, and again, I welcome your counsel and education of my amateur legal mind, as you so often do. The shall be detached, to me, puts the onus on the city, not on the applicant. Like, I guess that's my question. If the municipality services are not substantially complete within the prescribed time, then the tortoise shall be described by the governing body. Is that not our responsibility? Or is it's our responsibility if an application gets to us? Am I so amateur I'm not phrasing my question?
No, I understand your question. I would answer, I think there's two questions in there. The first one being, do we have a responsibility to essentially audit our territory and ensure compliance with that particular provision? And I have to answer that by saying I've never researched that issue, and I will be glad to do so and get you a response.
Thank you.
The second part of that is, if it is brought to our attention, do we have an obligation? And I have researched that issue, and I believe that the answer is yes, whether that's through an application or through other process.
Through an application?
Through petition.
So I guess then my question is, if it's brought to our attention, does it have to be brought to our attention by a sufficient application or simply brought to our attention?
It would need to be, I can answer that for certain, it would have to be entertained if brought by a proper petition. I can't answer whether any form of notice is sufficient to trigger that analysis.
Okay. Sorry for my
No, that's fine.
amateurish legal scholarship.
I think it's an excellent question. It's just not one I've looked at.
So are you saying that we determine the proper aspect of what he just asked? You said,
No, that's not what I was saying, Commissioner. I think as it relates to sufficient, if there was a sufficient petition, then yes, I think then it is up to you guys to run that analysis and determine whether or not there would be an ordinance that would pass that would detach the property. I, again, have not researched, but will be happy to do so and provide an answer to this body well in advance of the next meeting, the second part of that question.
Can we have an ordinance by next meeting?
Absolutely.
Other questions?
Do the residents currently have any water services? Do they have well water services currently?
No.
I don't think I understand the question, Commissioner.
The urgency that they were talking about, you clarified my main question, which was construction moving ahead, so that's not an issue in my mind anymore. I was just wondering, have they been granted access to water services? Not utility, but the well that they applied for. Is that preventing them from moving forward with their?
My understanding is that's been completed at this point in time.
Okay, so they have everything to continue a build.
And those are two separate tracks. So,
Okay.
yeah.
66% does not. One of the three does. The other two have not been granted.
We had to fight for it, because they told me to put up a windmill. When we called the city, somebody on the phone told me to put up a windmill.
I mean, those are pretty.
It's great, still gonna drill the well.
And again, I think that the considerations being addressed with regard to these details are important.
Yeah, but
They're very important. And what is being expressed and the concerns that are being brought before the commission need to be looked at, but they are outside of the consideration that we were discussing.
To put all that in, how far away is the city water from you?
On the other side of the lake.
On the other side of the lake?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous.
9 miles to your closest.
We don't even have an OG&E line close to us to provide power to give them some panels. But
You can't get the permits.
we were getting a runaround for the permits
To
when we were
drill
trying
the
to do
well.
proper channels. And we've got runarounds, and we had to work our way up till, we had to tell them to call the city manager.
Sir, why don't you come up to the microphone so you can answer Commissioner Seahorn. You're welcome to come up.
My name's Evan Stiles. I'm Serena's brother. I
Okay,
was out there
very
helping
good.
her clean up the property.
Thank you, sir.
We had a problem with, we applied to have a well drilled. They applied for the permit. The city denied it because we didn't have a legal address. The address was obtained from 911 of the county due to what the city told us to do. I had to go into an office with one of the inspectors and somebody else, and they kept telling me that we couldn't have a permit approval for our well to be drilled because we didn't have a proper address.
Mm-hmm.
We had paperwork that the city accepted the address, even though there was a clerical error between Shawnee's 911, county's 911, somebody, but they approved it. We then had to argue again, and I had to tell them to go to your boss and your boss and your boss to get us approval to drill the well. All we wanted to do was drill the well. We waited 3 months after being on their list to get our well drilled, and the city denied it. And every time we turned around, it was a different story on why we were denied. Every different person, until finally I got a special consideration.
You do have.
And they allowed us to drill the well.
Okay.
After we had to fight to get our well drilled.
Understand. I'm sorry you went through
And
that, but
every time we turn around, the city is giving us a runaround on different permits which is why we're at this point today and went through the proper channels to be de-annexed because we have no city services. So it should not be your problem. We'll deal with it, and now they're fighting us on that.
okay. Very good. Thank you, sir. I wanted to make sure we could hear your answer. Any other questions?
The church went through that, trying to drill a well. Mainly Baptist,
Yeah.
that we had to address.
Any other questions? Situation.
Yes, sir.
Well, we've closed our public hearing, but I will allow you to ask a question. if
My
you're
name's Rick Stiles.
Yes, sir.
I'm Serena's
Yes, sir.
father, and I just have one question for each of you. What did you campaign to protect? The people
Okay,
or the employees of the city?
okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so, any other questions for staff? We have a motion.
Sir, can I clarify?
No,
something?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you ask for an ordinance to be put on next?
Yes, sir, I did.
Agenda? Okay,
I did.
so that's already been asked for.
Yes, I want to make sure.
Okay, very good.
I saw the city manager writing it down also.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure that we had that, definitely.
Joe, did you, and this probably was like at the very beginning, however long ago, did I understand you correctly when you said there was no reason to turn it down?
I don't think so, Commissioner.
Because I'm looking at what I've written down so far, and it's,
Perhaps when I was explaining that at this point, we are not prepared to offer an opinion, I led you to believe that we were not possessed with reasons to turn it down. We have reasons to go forward with it, which you've heard from Mr. Brackeen. We have reasons to turn it down, which I've addressed, and we're trying to determine which is the correct path.
One more question.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to go through all of our options and make sure I understand how these work. Obviously, we could approve.
Correct.
We could deny. If, in that case, they would have to start all over again. And what I'm getting to
No,
is if
Mr. Mayor,
we
we-
were
we-
to defer it.
We didn't actually talk about that, just so everyone has clarity. If you were to deny it, essentially say, we're gonna turn down an ordinance, deny detachment, that would trigger their right to take this to district court. That's the next step in the process. By deferring it, it would give us the opportunity, as we've been instructed by your honor, to draft the ordinance for consideration by this body at the next regular meeting, at which point in time it could be denied or approved. If denied, that would trigger their right to go to district court. If approved, there would be a detachment.
Okay.
Can we vote to approve it even though there's not an ordinance?
You could. I mean, technically you could, but we would prepare an ordinance that would need to be ratified and would not be effective until it was done, which would be next month. But I want to be very clear, you could vote to approve it.
I mean, because that's how my reading is, and I appreciate that, because I'm inclined to approve it, but item 9 is a public hearing consideration of an ordinance, which the ordinance doesn't exist. So
Correct,
that's
but you
my reading in open meetings and what we have to post. Like, I don't think the way I read it, which is.
I think it would be
timeline.
largely symbolic, Commissioner, if you were to go that road, because it would require the drafting of the ordinance and ratification at the next meeting.
Which means the timeline would basically be the same.
Correct.
So essentially, we can make a motion to defer that is approved, and a motion to approve is really like a motion to instruct staff to prepare an ordinance, which is essentially the same as a motion to defer, except it's more symbolic.
I think that is accurate.
The timeline doesn't change.
The timeline doesn't change, and I suppose what's symbolic is somewhat subjective, but I think I agree with you.
But I mean, if we approved a motion tonight, or to instruct staff to draft, the attachment doesn't actually happen until next month when we ratify that ordinance.
Correct.
Versus if we defer and you present an ordinance at the next meeting and we approve, so it doesn't really move the needle outside of, it doesn't move the timeline.
Correct.
But what it would do was give the applicants the assurance that we're moving forward to detach.
I can't speak for them, Commissioner, but I imagine as much.
Yeah, okay.
If we're not in fear of setting a precedent, either way, that we don't know the legal answer to from our counsel.
I think that's valid. I mean, I think we could instruct staff, you can correct me if I'm wrong again, we can instruct staff to draft an ordinance, vote to approve the instruction to do it, and we could still vote no at the next meeting.
That's correct.
So we could give them false hope. So in other words, I mean, they're gonna have to at some point take us at our word that we're seriously considering this and want it on the next agenda to have a resolution, whether it's approve, deny, or not deny, but approve or defer. Like, the timeline doesn't change, and they're gonna have to take us at our word either way.
If it's deferred tonight, it would not be appropriate to defer it again.
Well, that's what I mean, like, but if we defer it tonight and ask for it to be on the next agenda versus instruct you to bring it, we approve you bringing us an ordinance at the next meeting.
I think your question is we could approve it tonight and then we could vote no on the ordinance.
Right, and they're still gonna have to take us.
Right, yeah.
They're gonna have to take us at our word that we're taking it seriously and want to get the resolution.
That process makes me very nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Which goes back to your original point of why best practice would be to have the ordinance prepared and voted on.
Right, because I find myself in favor of what the applicants are requesting, but because we do want to do things right, I don't see the vehicle for us to approve it tonight. And which you've kind of confirmed that it would come for ratification at the next meeting, so I'd rather take the less legally confusing path and hope that they'll take us at our word that we're trying to get this done.
Did you say that that approval would be the more confusing vehicle? Is that what you just said?
Right, because we're approving something that doesn't exist. And so our approval is actually instructing them to draft something, and we've already asked them to draft something. In my understanding, if we approve it tonight, we still have to approve it again at the next meeting.
Like they did however many?
Because we don't have an ordinance yet.
Did they, on these other ones, at the same time during the public hearing? Are we lacking something that in precedence they had before?
No, not if we're following a similar precedence. Those ordinances, well, strike that. I can't speak to the first one that was referenced that was 10 years old. But the one that was done 2 years ago, the ordinance was prepared and presented at the same time, but that was a staff recommendation for approval. That's the difference. The staff recommendation tonight is to defer for the reasons set forth.
Wouldn't deferring be sort of almost like a false hope as well? Just making it a bit more dirty and angry down the line if we were to defer now and have an ordinance next month and then vote no next month for whatever reason? Wouldn't that just be the same thing, only pushing it a month and kicking it down the line? I mean, if I were petitioning for something and...
So, if I may, this is not about our opinions. This is about trying to make sure that we're following the letter of the law.
Right.
Staff had some concerns, which why it was declared insufficient. If we defer, it gives us time to both prepare the ordinance as well as research and make sure that those concerns can be set aside. So this is not about compelling legal arguments, and I do have to admit, Mr. Rakeen was very compelling. But we are trying to do what is right. It is also not about against people, for people, against staff, for staff. We are trying to make sure that we are fair, we do what is right, and we do that for all So, no false hope. A simple ask for deferral, which will allow us to research that one concern we have. In the meantime, we prepare the ordinance and we can bring it back to the city commission.
Any other questions? If not, I'm going to make the motion to defer. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Darren. Oh, yeah, we got to log back in. We've been talking a while. I'm not used to that.
We have a motion and a second, right?
Yes, sir, we
So
have
we
a
can
motion
bring
and a
back the
second.
We can make final
Yes,
comments.
and we've made that, absolutely you can.
I just want to say I appreciate Mr. Vondran and Mr. Brackeen and the applicants. I mean, I think this is a challenging case, but I think as Madam City Manager says, we all want to do what's right, and we've all got to figure out what that is. I tend to be in favor of what the case the applicants have made, but in doing what's right, I don't see the vehicle that would allow us to get to approval tonight, so I'm going to vote to defer because the ordinance isn't included. So I look forward to it being on next month's agenda and the opportunity to hopefully find resolution.
Thank you, sir. Everybody logged in? Of course, it doesn't matter if you are.
Yeah.
Commissioner Hill.
Apparently not.
Everybody's in? Okay, we have a motion and a second to defer.
defer to
Yes,
the
ma'am.
next meeting.
Yes, ma'am, to next meeting.
Commissioner Flood?
There.
Commissioner Flood?
I said yes,
Okay,
and I
sorry.
clicked yes too.
Oh, wait.
It did. How about that? Okay, motion carries 6-1, so we will see this again next month. Item 10, we have a public hearing and consideration. I'll tell you what, before we do that, let's take 10 minutes and have a break, because I know everybody's probably ready for one.
well, I've been moving my mouse and looking through it, so I don't know.
Okay, we'll get back at
I might be
it.
keeping it awake inadvertently.
So item 10 is a public hearing in consideration of an ordinance to rezone property located at 1320 North Harrison Avenue from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C3 Automotive Commercial District. Case number RZ04-23. Applicant is Nathan Ferguson. Mr. Harkins, how are you, sir?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Ryan Harkins, Community Development Director. This is a rezoning request, 1320 North Harrison, due to a publication error that was discovered during the review and approval process. Staff's recommendation is to not hold the public hearing, but rather remand the item back to the Planning Commission to begin the rehearing process over again.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Harkins?
Would that motion, is a motion to remand?
It is.
Okay. We've never had one.
Any other questions?
What was the failure?
So there was a typo in the legal for one of the documents associated with this case. And so to fix the problem going forward at the moment of intake, the applicants will be not only required to have a hard copy of the legal description, but an electronic version. We will check that against county records as well. And if it passes muster, then we'll issue the legal notices. That'll be the same legal description we'll use throughout the approval process for the ordinances as well.
Okay, so you need a motion to remand. That
We
would
do.
be your recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion we remand item 10 to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to remand item 10 back to the Planning Commission. We will call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Item 11 is also a public hearing in consideration of an ordinance to rezone property located at 731 North Kickapoo Avenue from R3 Multifamily Residential District to C1 Neighborhood Commercial District. Case number RZ03-23. Applicant is Hayden Stanfield. And Mr. Harkins, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, sir. This is a rezoning request from, as noted, from R3 to C1. It is on North Kickapoo Avenue. The applicant is requesting, although while the property is undeveloped, the rezoning in order to accommodate future development. The property is surrounded by a mixture of R3 and C1 zoning, so staff views this as an extension of that C1 district rather than a case of spot zoning. The item, when it went before the Planning Commission, was approved for recommendation on a vote of 5-0. Staff's recommendation is approval as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, we will open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor? How are you, sir?
Pretty good.
If you would, be sure to get your
My
name.
name's Hayden Stanfield.
All right, how are you, sir?
I'm good.
Good.
What I'm planning on doing with that undeveloped land is build a warehouse / plumbing office and run service calls and sort of use it as a dispatching office. And I plan on getting it completely developed within the year.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Stanfield? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? Oh, come on up, come on up.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Wilma Schilling, and I own the property, and I'm selling it to Mr. Hayden.
Okay.
I also own a business that is the next block in the Kickapoo, in the 600 block. And I see that this will be a good building for the community, because right now there is a lot of there is a lot of properties that are empty, and with this will embellish the city and will bring new businesses, and also rundown places will become available and will be better for the city. So I think it will be a good opportunity for the city to get more business in.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Appreciate you speaking with us. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak in favor? Seeing none, is there anyone who'd like to speak in opposition? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion up here or questions for anybody? Anybody got a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second. Oh, man. I think that was you, Mark and Darren. Mr. City Attorney, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance concerning the zoning classification of the following described property located within the corporate limits of the city of Shawnee, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, to wit, lots 35 and 36, Block 3, Estes Orchard addition to the city of Shawnee, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, according to the recorded plat thereof, less and accept a tract of land beginning at the northeast corner of lot 36, thence south 20 feet, thence west 15 feet, thence north 20 feet, thence east 15 feet to the point of beginning. From zoning classification R3, multifamily residential district, to C1, neighborhood commercial district, amending the official zoning map of the city of Shawnee accordingly.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 11. We'll call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Item 12 is a public hearing. In consideration of an ordinance to rezone property located at 602 North Harrison from C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C3 Automotive Commercial District. Case number RZ05-23, applicant Joel Villalobos. Mr. Harkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a rezoning request as noted to go from C1 to C3. The applicant owns the property at this address. It's currently zoned as noted C1. You have property that's C3 adjacent to it, as well as C1. So again, this is an extension of existing zoning that's abutting the property. So this would be an extension of one of those districts rather than spot zoning. The Planning Commission is, their review, recommending approval by a 5-0 vote. Staff's recommendation is approval as well. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will open our public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak in favor? The floor is yours. Okay, seeing none, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay, we will close the public hearing. Questions, comments up here? If not, do we have a motion?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'll second.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 12. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. An ordinance concerning the zoning classification of the following described property located within the corporate limits of the city of Shawnee, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, to wit, the east 65 feet of the south half of Block 13 and the south half of Block 20, all in Richard and Mary's addition to the city of Shawnee, Potawatomi County, Oklahoma, according to the recorded plat thereof, less than accept a tract 15 feet by 20 feet in the northwest corner of said tract described as beginning at the point 45 feet west of the northeast corner of the south half of Block 13, thence west 20 feet, then south 15 feet, thence east 20 feet, thence north 15 feet to the point of beginning. From zoning classification C1 Neighborhood Commercial District to C3 Highway Commercial District, amending the official zoning map of the city of Shawnee accordingly.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 12. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 13, consideration of a final plat for Heritage Plains Phase 1 on approximately 24.9 acres located north of West Tech Road on the north side of North Kickapoo Avenue. Case number FPL 02-23. Applicant is John Woods. Mr. Harkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a final plat request for 74 single-family lots. This is the first phase of the Heritage Plains subdivision, as noted in the staff report. Property has already been rezoned to R1. Staff has reviewed the application. There are 2 items noted in the staff report that are being requested for revision. One is a street name and the other is a turnaround for fire apparatus. The applicant has no objections to those items and is in agreement with them. Planning Commission's recommendation comes to you for approval on a vote of 5-0. Staff's recommendation is approval as noted in the staff report with the additional conditions.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Anyone have questions for Mr. Harkins? If not, do we have a motion?
Make a motion, we approve item 13 with staff recommendation.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Daniel and Travis. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval. We'll call.
With conditions? Yeah, with staff recommendation, which has the conditions.
Good. All righty, we will call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Item 14, consideration of a task order in accordance with the agreement between the City of Shawnee and Cowan Group Engineering LLC for water system improvements in Thompson Heights Addition. Mr. Barkheimer, how are you tonight, sir?
Pretty good. How are you, Mr. Mayor? So I think the commission is very aware, but just for a little bit of context, this and the next couple of items, so items 15 and 16, are the next round of ARPA projects. Back in September of 2022, staff briefed commission on the plan for the city's ARPA funding, allocating the funding for water and sewer projects and maintenance hotspots around town. That would come back before you as separate task orders. This specific task order is the replacement of water lines in the Thompson Heights addition. It was included in the list of projects to be completed within the state legislative allocation of ARPA. So this group of projects was a part of the application that we made to the state legislator for funding. It includes the replacement of over 5,600 feet of water main. This task order is for survey, design, bidding, and limited construction admin. And as the mayor stated, it's with Cowan Group Engineering LLC for $155,400. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Any questions? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Mark and Daniel. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 14. We will call that question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 15, consideration of a task order in accordance with the agreement between City of Shawnee and Cowan Group Engineering LLC for sewer system improvements. Mr. Parkheimer, it's all yours again.
Yes, sir. So pretty simple explanation here. Same background as the last item. As part of our state application for ARPA, we had 13 areas of sewer mains that were identified for pipe bursting. In hopes that they don't end up similar to item 4 tonight with an emergency repair before you. Those 13 areas were grouped together in this package. It includes the replacement of 7,500 feet of sewer main line. This task order is basically to put a bid package together to do pipe bursting in all 13 areas. Again, that task order is with Cowan Group Engineering LLC for $43,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve item 15.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Neil and Tammy. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 15. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 16, consideration of a task order in accordance with the agreement between City of Shawnee and Friesen Nichols, Inc. for water system improvements along Alice Street, Fay Street, Edward Street, and Pusodum Street. Mr. Barkheimer, you're up.
Yes, sir. One more time on the ARPA theme here. Same background as the previous two task orders. This is a replacement of several lines over in the Highland Heights edition and Melrose Park edition. The replacement of these water lines was included in the list of projects within the state legislative allocation of ARPA. It includes 6,000 feet of water main replacement. This task order is for survey, design, bidding, and limited construction admin. It's with Friesen Nichols Incorporated for $193,000. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Mark and Darren. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 16. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 17, consideration of a sales tax rebate agreement between the City of Shawnee and Brady's Properties. And our city manager is up.
I'm not quite as tall as Seth. Over the past few months, the city has been working with Brady Properties. Brady Properties has purchased the property just south of Marketplace 1 and wanted to develop additional retail. In order to make this an attractive development for the developer, we've been working to find an incentive for them. And the incentive the city offers is to rebate the cost of the public infrastructure in the form of a sales tax rebate. There are several businesses which will be located in this retail development, two of those being new to Shawnee. And the sales tax volume is anticipated to be sufficient enough to refund a portion thereof to pay for the proposed infrastructure that will be put in place. This is very similar to what the city had already done for Marketplace 1 and for Dominion Plaza. So we have followed an established process. But again, this is solely related to the cost of the infrastructure, public infrastructure, that will be put in place with this particular retail development. Here this evening are both Brady Ganiabadi as well as Ali Ganiabadi. If there are any additional questions for the developer, I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the sales tax rebate agreement itself.
Questions? Do we have any idea on timeline on that project?
Ground has been broken, but I cannot give you a timeline. I would refer to.
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I know people are going to be wondering.
Right. Well, we have to get it done.
Absolutely.
Get it done by January 20 next year.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second for approval of item 17. We'll call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Item 18, consideration of a resolution adopting the high hazard potential dam amendment to the Pottawatomie County Hazard Mitigation Plan for the city of Shawnee. Mr. Barkheimer.
Yes, sir. So if you recall, in the last quarter of 2022, we brought a grant opportunity to you all from OWRB, the High Hazard Potential Grant, High Hazard Potential Dam Grant. The grant pays up to 65% of design and field exploration on projects to remediate HHPD dams. A requirement of that grant is a specific section and specific language in the hazard mitigation plan covering the dams in the grant. Since the City of Shawnee's effective hazard mitigation plan is the Pottawatomie County Hazard Mitigation Plan, we initiated the process of adding an addendum to the plan to comply with the grant requirements. So the goal of that addendum is to examine the comprehensive all dam risks to ascertain the varying degrees associated with risks to potential dam failure, define goals and propose strategies to address the increasing concerns associated with aging infrastructure at the Shawnee Twin Lake dams, and develop strategic action plans for future implementation by the city. This item is a resolution supporting the adoption of the addendum, and staff does recommend approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? How about a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have a second? Thank you, sir. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 18. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Were you not supposed to read?
I was.
Can we fix that?
We can.
There we go.
A resolution adopting the City of Shawnee High Hazard Potential Dam Amendment as an amendment to the Pottawatomie County Hazard Mitigation Plan update.
All righty. Is there any need to vote again, in case
No.
anyone's asking?
No.
Thank you, sir. Item 19, consideration of a resolution renewing ordinance number 1396 NS, the 919 emergency number ordinance for the period of April 6, 2023 to April 5, 2026. And Ms. McNabb Fox is up. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So as you read, the City of Shawnee established the emergency 911 service on May 18th, 1987 by the approval of ordinance number 1396 NS. This ordinance requires a renewal every 3 years, and the resolution before you is to renew the 911 service through April 5th of 2026.
All righty. Any questions? If not, we need a motion.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, ma'am. Do I hear a second?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Cammie and Travis. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A resolution renewing ordinance number 1396 NS, the 911 emergency number ordinance for the period of April 6, 2023 to April 5th, 2026.
Thank you, sir. We have a motion and a second for approval of item 19. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 20, consideration of resolution setting the 911 emergency tax rate. And Ms. McNabb Fox, the floor is all yours.
Yes, sir. So the aforementioned ordinance also set the emergency telephone service tax of 3%. The collections are used for the operations of the emergency telephone service. Section 6C of the ordinance states that the commission reviews and establishes a rate annually, not to exceed the original rate. It is staff's recommendation for the rate to remain at 3%.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve item 20.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Daniel and Cammie. We have a motion and a second for approval of item 20. We'll call the question.
Mr. Mayor, this will be on.
I'm sorry.
A resolution setting the 911 emergency tax rate.
You see that one line down there.
I know, it's
Call the question. And motion passes 7-0. Item 21 is considering bids for Highland Street sidewalk improvements. And I think Mr. Barkheimer is passing those out to us.
Thanks, sir.
Can we just pass those down? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Okay, so this is, as you read, the bid opening for the Highland Street Sidewalk Project. We had 5 bidders submit qualified bids, the first of which is SAC Services Incorporated at $1,438,144.80. Second bidder was Downey Contracting LLC at $1,523,087. Third bidder is EMC Services at $1,108,070. Fourth bidder was CP Integrated Services at $1,198,939. And the last bidder was Rudy Construction Company at $1,426,875. At this time, staff would request deferral so that we may review the bid tabulation and make an educated recommendation.
Okey-doke. Any questions, or you would like to make a motion?
Do we have a projection of what it,
Yeah, unfortunately, our engineer's estimate was the low bid. It was about $985,000 was the engineer's estimate, so.
985. Any other questions? Or do we have a motion?
move to defer?
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Okay. Daniel. Okay, we have a motion to defer item 21, motion and a second. We will call that question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 22, we will acknowledge monthly sales tax report.
Good evening again. The sales tax for March totaled $2,037,034, which includes $1,753 in interest. This is distributed across 7 funds with $1.16 million going to the general fund. These collections are 15% over budget projections for the month and 14% over March of last year. Year to date, we are 13.4% ahead of budget and 6.3% over this same time last year. Use tax for March totaled $207,587, which is a 12% decrease from March last year and a 2% increase over budget projections for the year. Year-to-date collections are 4% above this same time last year. The general fund is currently $1.4 million above budget projections when you combine the sales and use tax. We have appropriated approximately 80% of those collections, leaving a balance unappropriated of $256,429.
Very good. Any questions? I guess not. Thank you very much for the good news. Item 23, we have administrative reports. First one is the 2023 homeless point in time count. Mr. Harkins.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We wanted to give you kind of a brief update on where we stand after our latest point in time count. You may remember that we do this annually. This is a requirement by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. In the past, we've done this in conjunction with a number of other service providers. We've led our own effort the last 2 years. This is done the last 10 days of January across the country. We look at the number of sheltered and unsheltered people that are unhoused in our community. We do this as one way to help provide funding through the continuum of care that we belong to, but also we use this data not only for our own tracking purposes, but in any other grant applications related to the homeless program that we pursue. Overall, we're down about 30%, which is a huge decrease over a 12-month period. This was in part due to the ability to use an ESG grant and a lot of volunteer manpower and a lot of donations. This is an example of the community coming together and using a small amount of resources and a lot of willpower to make some things happen for a number of people. So this is a testament to the community's desire to make things happen. Last year, we had 59 unsheltered, as you can see on the comparison to 56, 12 to 12, 14 to 16, 5 to 6, 60 to 28, 62 to 32. And so you can see where the numbers have shifted over time. We have a lot of stakeholders, especially on Main Street, anecdotally, that are telling us they see progress, they see results happening. A lot of the service providers in the roundtable that has been established are trying to bring resources to bear to help individuals case by case as we reduce the number. Overall, when you take the raw number and then add it by 4, which HUD recommends, you see the total number reduced from 860 to around right at 600 for that 30% decrease. And again, I want to emphasize this is done a lot by a grant that we were able to obtain to help us get started and then provide some services, as well as continuing those services through a lot of volunteer labor. We have one full-time person at City Hall that provides leadership and management of the day-to-day, and that's Erica, our homeless program coordinator. We have a number of interns and volunteers. These volunteers provide the bulk of the work, especially with street outreach, helping Erica, and then manpower at the Homeless Resource Center. That is an item that will continue in the next year, and the renewal of that agreement will be coming to your next agenda. I mentioned how we report the data, and ultimately it goes to HUD, but there's a few steps between us and HUD that it goes through first. One of those is the continuum of care. That is a regional group that we belong to of different service providers. They range from domestic violence shelters to city governments to different groups that work in varying capacities with veterans or unhoused individuals in different segments. It can and often does involve tribal governments, but it's a cooperative group. You'll notice, however, when you look at the map, the light green area that includes Potawatomi and Seminole County. So the continuum of care that we're a part of stretches from Seminole County out to the Panhandle. They roughly have just under $150,000 every year to operate with as far as distributing to various entities. So we don't receive any money through the continuum of care. That has led us, for among other reasons, to start the process of looking at our own continuum of care. That would allow us to go after resources directly from HUD. It would allow us to take the roundtable that we've created and become the bulk and the steering group of the continuum of care, and allow us to guide resources to those providers in our community. It would be, to begin with, a continuum of care just focused on the city itself. This is a local collective body. They meet annually. They have subgroups that do work on various tasks and elements of the continuum of care plan. The idea is this is a collaborative approach. So again, this is about relationships and how we strengthen those relationships and maximize their effectiveness to provide services to our unhoused population. I can tell you in the infant stages, these providers have collaborated to house a number of individuals over the last year and provide different things that they need. And all of them are commended for the work that they do. With that said, some of the next steps that we are taking are finalizing the continuum of care documents, because there are 6 of them overall. And once we do an internal review, we'll start taking them through the external review process with the Department of Commerce as well as with HUD, and then the providers in the roundtable will have a chance to review and sign on to them as well. And at that point, we will send this to you for formal approval and then a recommendation to send it to HUD for acceptance. With that said, that's a lot in a couple of minutes, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
What's the timeline you anticipate until we can have our own continuum of care?
Well, there's when we submit the documents and then when HUD responds, and those are different answers. We're trying by the end of the, okay, part A, I was about to start. We're trying to have documents ready to submit by the end of the federal fiscal year, so that as they start in October, they have those in their hands.
Okay, thank you.
And we have access to funds based on our total population instead of spread out all towards West Virginia.
Correct. The continuum of cares funding is spread out across all of those counties. So right now they provide resources in terms of dollars to domestic violence shelters. I know of one that receives about 21,000 of that. And so the rest of that is spread out again across other entities in the continuum of care. So there's a small amount that gets divvied up very quickly. The continuum of care that we are currently part of does support us pulling out and creating our own. They know financially it will cause a hit because we're one of the larger communities in their area, along with Edmond and Midwest City, but they do feel like it's a step for us in the right direction.
Any other questions? I know you guys have, like you said, have placed a number of people in housing, working through our collaborative here locally. And I know a lot of folks, it maybe doesn't appear that way, especially on Main Street where the homeless are more visible. But, I mean, you guys have definitely done a lot of good work, and I appreciate all the hard work you've done. Appreciate what all the volunteers have done. I know they've had good luck getting volunteers to work at the resource center, and I think that does make a big difference. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing.
All right. Thank you.
Can you clarify what more observed means on your side-by-side from this year and last year?
So let me get to the right slide. So those are other people that we observe, or we can identify there's an encampment, for example, or a campsite, but we think based on the things that we see, there's a certain number of people there, or others, many cases, people we see that are unhoused, but we can't get a chance to talk with them and get an idea of if they're couch surfing or if they're staying at a shelter. So the best we can do is say, we've observed this individual.
Okay, so uncategorized as
Yeah.
far as the other bullet points?
Yeah.
When we went around and did the point in time count, those of us that volunteered for it, sometimes we'd come up into like an encampment, and you don't just barge in, you
Right.
would ask, and maybe you might see one person in there and they go, we don't want to talk to you. So, I mean, all you can do is make a count. There's probably lots of different ways that number is,
Yeah.
you come up with it, but it's just what you observe. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Appreciate
All right.
the report. That brings us to update on the Unified Code development, and I guess you get to stay right there.
I get to start.
Thank
I'm
you,
going to have
sir.
some assistance on this one. You may remember just Shortly after I arrived, at the beginning of 2022, we approved the contract with Friesen Nichols to begin the Unified Development Code process. We did a number of public engagement activities in the spring of 22, and then started working on different elements. We've worked through the general provisions. We're getting through a good internal draft of the subdivision regulations, but we felt like it was a good point to have kind of a project update from the consultants. So Don Warwick, the project manager from Friesen Nichols, is here to walk through exactly where we're at and what some of the next steps are, and then we'll be happy to answer any other questions about that project you might have.
Are you?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for entertaining an update this evening. As Mr. Harkins said, we are making good progress on the Land Development Code. I want to make sure that you're up to date and sort of filled in as to how we're moving forward with that project. So that is the purpose of this presentation, and I will move through it as quickly as possible because I know you all have had an evening and probably want to get on with things. But what I want to provide today is, like I said, an update on where we are with regard to the project, a few highlights from the work that's been done thus far, and talk a little bit about next steps. So you'll probably recall that the way that we structured this is a three-phase project, beginning with a diagnostic report. I brought a report or an overview of that document to the commission in September and sort of discussed the roadmap that we had developed in that diagnostic report for actually working on the content of the code update. And that's moved us into phase 2 of the project, which is taking the existing code and sort of reworking it, understanding what the desired changes are from the diagnostic report, and beginning to actually develop content for the update. There we go. Just as a little bit of background, the way that we got to this and the foundation for that diagnostic report was, of course, feedback from yourselves, from other decision makers, the Planning Commission, stakeholders within the community who are generally frequent code users, as well as the general public. From that feedback, as well as understanding your adopted policies and codes, we began to put together this diagnostic report. We also developed a public involvement plan so that we had a good strategy for informing the community about this project and keeping them up to speed. Which is that, sorry. We also conducted, as Mr. Harkins said, a couple of public engagement efforts. There's a project website that has been maintained and is current. During June, for about 2 weeks, we had a virtual open house sort of open on that website that people could explore the project and provide feedback. And we conducted an in-person town hall type meeting here on June 16th. So all of that became fodder for the diagnostic report. And on this slide, I've got just a few highlights from the diagnostic report that are really specific to the subdivision section of the code, because that's where we've been spending a lot of time and what I can provide you a little bit more of an overview of. But just with regard to the process and where we are, September of 22, we basically wrapped up that diagnostic report and moved into the code writing phase. And during this phase, it's about 14 months long, so it's the biggest chunk or the biggest phase of the project. We'll be working chapter by chapter through the code, developing new content for you, working with staff to basically provide a draft, have them review that, make sure that it is in good shape so that it can then be posted to the project website and available for people to take a look at as we continue to work through other sections of the code. So that's where we are. At the end of that iterative process, we'll have all of the pieces compiled in a complete draft that we'll be able to talk more holistically about, present to yourselves and to the stakeholders that provided early input into the process, and also get that information on the website so that anyone who wishes to see it and to track the project has access to do so. The outline of the Unified Development Code looks like this. There are several what we're calling articles, and the highlighted articles that are shown here, general provisions and subdivision regulations, we have good solid working drafts of those sections. The first general provisions we worked on for a couple of months. They are basically, this is basically the section that establishes the statutory authority for the community to conduct land development, to adopt land development regulations, to conduct reviews, to ensure that you have sort of a standardized process and guide for making those decisions. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time on subdivision regulations. The subdivision regulations have 4 main sections. You'll notice in here that there's not a procedures section. There will be a completely separate article or chapter within the Unified Development Code that walks you through all of the different types of procedures relevant to any development applications for the city. So subdivision regulations will cover these 4 main topics, and you'll see that especially when we get to the design standards or the design standards, there's kind of a whole lot to it. So, and as an overview for the subregs, the land division types, these are the types of plats or lots that can be created. When platting is required is determined, is stated. And basically that's any time that you're creating more than 2 lots and lots that don't meet any exemptions at the state level. So lots that are larger than 5 acres are exempt from platting requirements by state statute. We talk about street dedications, what happens when there's a private street. When we get into the design standards of the subdivision regulations, make sure I'm on the right slide here, how lots are arranged, what to do with and how to identify and administer things like flag lots or through lots. So the various shapes and configurations of lots that might be possible and what's desirable with regard to a unified development pattern for the city. So lot dimensions and addressing things like site triangles, making sure that you have clear visual connections at each of at intersecting locations so that you're able to navigate those intersections safely. We also, in the design standards section, talk about access management. This is something that is fairly new criteria that helps to control access and provide both safety as well as capacity on your adjacent streets to make sure that spacing between driveways is appropriate and the width of driveways as well. Take it with my notes here. In the streets section, we included a section on traffic impact analysis. So when those are required, what would trigger that, and the type of development and the type of impact. Also, the general requirements for street layouts. We also incorporated a design criteria matrix. So what this does is provides a standard for these standards for each different type of street classification. Lots and blocks, identifying the length of the appropriate street length for a block for different types of street frontages, and also incorporating some traffic calming recommendations based upon the length of the street segments, different ways that the streets can be designed in order to make sure that you're providing a safe street and calming traffic where it's appropriate with regard to the types of development that it serves and desirable speeds and the atmosphere of those streets. We also incorporated what we call pedestrian facility zones. So generally your pedestrian facilities are your sidewalks on either side of the street, but the pedestrian facility zone sort of takes in a little bit more than that and provides space for planters, for lighting, for street furnishings, trash bins, and those types of things. So it's an area that is sort of reserved for non-vehicular mobility. And that's defined within the subdivision regulations. We also incorporate street lighting criteria. And these are really the street lights to provide for the vehicular areas of the street, and the pedestrian lights would be within that pedestrian facility zone. Let's see. The subdivision regulations also provide standards for alleys and private streets, so addressing the type of ownership, maintenance, how service and loading happens on private streets or alleys, and other types of technical requirements there. They can be tighter locations typically, so visibility is often an issue and needs to be addressed. So we also, in the design standards, address easements and utilities. So this is, again, about the layout of your subdivisions and how they're served by necessary public utilities, making sure that the easements are available for proper access to water, sewer, streets, and other utilities. All right. The design standards also incorporate a section on drainage and storm sewers. In this section, we address detention and retention requirements, the dedication of drainage easements, and making sure that the subdivision regulations are consistent with the city's floodplain requirements. We incorporated some conservation easements and setbacks to provide protection along designated waterways. So this is new, and there's a required buffer established to address USGS blue line streams. So those are some additional standards that are incorporated. With regard to water and wastewater facilities, we looked at the connection requirements. So right now, there's a requirement for properties to connect to the public water and wastewater lines, so your main water and sewer lines, if they're within a quarter mile of an existing main line for proximity to the new or proposed development. We're proposing to extend that to a half mile, so that's something that we want vetted and we want to talk a little bit more about, because that will require additional connections than what you currently require under your standards. Let's see. With regard to stormwater pollution prevention, this is really just ensuring that we're following the state permit requirements, ensuring and requiring necessary erosion control where appropriate based upon the development type and activity. We added a section addressing low-impact development. It is not mandatory. We wanted to ensure that low-impact development was mentioned throughout policy documents and conversations as a desirable option. So we incorporated that. It doesn't require that people utilize low-impact development design techniques, but it does support that and gives your engineering group the opportunity to review for compliance and make sure that that's an equivalent type of design solution to conventional design solutions. There is a section on parkland dedication, and this section requires the dedication of parkland for the development or creation of new residential lots. Right now, it's set at 1 acre, dedicated 1 acre for 100 dwelling units. There are standards for the type of property that can be dedicated and considered parkland for that purpose. Also required improvements that would go along with that, as well as alternatives. So if there is a very small project or something where there's not appropriate land to be dedicated, there are alternatives that can be considered and approved by the Planning Commission. Let's see. And then the final section in the subdivision regulations addresses performance guarantees and maintenance. So generally, subdivisions require that public infrastructure is provided to support and to serve any new lot that's being created. And so this provision ensures that that public infrastructure that's installed by your private developers is properly guaranteed and maintained over the warranty period, but it also provides an opportunity for your developers to guarantee certain improvements and get their final plat prior to those improvements being installed. So they would provide a guarantee in order to advance their final plat through the approval process. So, next steps. I highlighted on this slide that the next steps that we will be looking at are the zoning districts and uses. So we've already started working through that. In fact, we've got our most recent update of the subdivision regulations back today and should have those available to staff in the morning. I've also indicated on here, we are working on an engineering design criteria manual, and this is a technical document that runs in tandem with your land development codes. It's really the how to design public infrastructure, and that's an element of the project that we will be working through as we build out the different sections of the code. Most of those components where it's talking about very specific criteria for how to calculate storm runoff, for instance, those types of very detailed technical data we're pulling out of the code and moving to this technical manual. The code will still list the requirements and ensure that everyone is following a standard set of rules. The technical manual will be the guide for how they follow those rules and what the designed documents have to have in them for your staff to be able to review for compliance. So that's a companion piece that's coming alongside as we build out the code documents. We've workshopped probably 2 or 3 times with staff different elements of zoning districts and uses. That's a really key and important component to your land development regulations. So we're prepared to get working on that element, that section of the code, and that'll be coming your way fairly soon. So next steps, again, to finish out this phase 2 is to keep working through this iterative process and building out the different sections of the Unified Development Code. And then we'll move into phase 3 where we have a full draft of that code and are able to kind of take that show back on the road, get additional feedback, make sure that we've answered questions. Another element or document that we're going to be working on that we think will be helpful is basically a big ideas or big changes type of memo so that you all get an understanding of what changes are really what we're really looking at as far as some of these changes that are significant. A lot of what we're doing is reformatting and cleaning up and improving the language, adding bullets and graphics lists so that it's a much more user-friendly document. It will be hyperlinked, so it'll be a much easier to navigate document, but we want to really highlight the criteria that change so that people are not caught unaware as we get towards the end of the process. So those are the key highlights. As I mentioned, we are maintaining the project website, and we'll have material there to keep people informed about the project as it moves forward. And we are happy to, and I am happy to answer questions.
Any questions? There's a lot there. Any questions? No, I think we're good. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you. I will see you again, I think later this year. I've got, in one of those slides, I forgot to say the exact date, but we'll have another update to the Planning Commission and City Commission before we have a full document, full draft. So
Okay.
this fall.
All righty, very good. Thank you so much. Appreciate all your hard work. Okay. We're up to item 24, new business.
No new business, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. We are up now to Commissioners' comments. It's item 25. Lauren, you want to start down your end?
Yeah. I guess I'm excited for the election in June, and I want to thank everyone who came and spoke, and that's really all I have because it was a lot, so.
Okay.
I hadn't really collected the thoughts in it.
All right.
I thought I was going last this time.
Threw you a curveball.
Because you change off with us, and so I'm always like, okay, I get some time here
All right.
to collect my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Mark, you're up, sir.
The Unified code is going to be definitely a major plus to streamline everything. I think the builders will know where they're at, and I think it'll make life a lot easier for everybody that's involved in that aspect of it. Sales tax, keeps trending good. I was worried a little bit about inflation, but it's way over inflation rate. So the marketplace development, that'll be a big addition to us also. That's about all I've got.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. You cleared up my sales tax line for me, so good job. Thank you for the report. Wanted to thank staff. The civic clerk is working a lot better this evening, and I can see the benefits to this once it all gets perfected. It's going to be pretty cool. There's just a lot more information in there for us, and thank you for putting up with some of us that are not as computer savvy as others. And I think that's going to be good.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Flood.
Just like to say thank you to city staff for hard work and continuing to do things to help us keep moving forward. I'm excited about the moving forward of new businesses and continuing to move forward on sidewalks and overall improvements throughout our city and just look forward to continuing the progress and look forward to the conversations about the charter changes. I'm excited to see interest from some of our community members regarding that, and in the hopes that they can have more input in their world through some of those changes.
Thank you, sir.
I'm encouraged to see that a lot of the things that we've discussed tonight have been the result of the community's concerns that are now making that process of progress and actually being implemented, whether it's the charter changes or the unified development codes, which we've heard for years from builders and developers to make ourselves easier to navigate that process. And I know that's a lot of work on staff. I appreciate your dedication to modernizing our city so that we are more desirable for people to open businesses and to build and to renovate. And I'm encouraged by that. It's awesome to see so many citizens here participating tonight. And I think we're starting to see people hopefully realizing that their concerns will be made into some progress, whether that's charter changes or just here in the actual meeting. I'm very excited about the Unified Development Codes being updated, being more user-friendly. The sales tax is encouraging because the numbers are actually a little bit different than I thought they would be, and they're telling me that people are shopping locally more than I thought. Not as much of that percentage is coming from use tax as I assumed, and so that's actually encouraging if the numbers are going up, and that's and then the only real thing that I wanted to inform the public about, the Lake Master Plan next public meeting is next Tuesday. It's at Gordon Cooper. It's open to everyone, not just Lake residents or whatever, but especially if you are someone that's very concerned about the Lake Master Plan, please join us at Gordon Cooper next Tuesday. It's come and go from 5:30 to 7:30, and there will be lots of staff and experts there to help answer questions. Thank you.
A couple things. Really excited about getting the charter changes now to the people, particularly the one on ward voting. That's been something I've worked on behind the scenes, and it takes time, and glad to finally get it here. I think that was maybe the part people, it's hard to understand because now it has to go from us. It's not just us, it's us, the people, the governor. And so I'm looking forward to the education component that'll go along with that, and why that's important. And allow people to, again, be part of that process. Encouraged by sales tax rate, or the sales tax that had, the numbers, I think one caveat on that, I think I saw were 6.3% over last year, which when we look at inflation, we had the CPI that we talked about at 6.5, so we're healthy because I think we've been fiscally responsible, but we're still trending. Our growth is right about at the same level. It's not explosive. But we're keeping up with inflation. I think that's good. And on fiscally responsible, I think that's been, whether it's our 2% rainy day that we do, or I think that's something that we have to be. And as painful as it is on water and sewer rates, it was much more painful when we didn't do them. And tying it to CPI, I think is smart, and I appreciate the holistic view and look at CPI, and so people can know what's coming. And so that's the responsible thing to do, because we have to keep SMA solvent in order to deliver the water, and we've run that risk before in trying to be conservative. And then on the sewage, that's contractually we're obligated for them to make that call. So we hate raising rates on anything, but we also have to keep keep the lights on and be solvent. So appreciate staff's effort to be fiscally responsible, and that's it for me.
Thank you, sir. I don't have a whole lot. I'm glad we're getting all those questions to the voters so they can make a decision on them. I think they're all good things, and I hope they all pass. We had good news on sales tax again, which is nice. That always helps. All the reports were very informative tonight, so I appreciate staff working on those. And then I'm going to answer some questions here that I was asked about being at Shawnee Ford on February 15th. On my calendar, I don't show that I was there. I saw that I got a haircut at 10:30, that I had a meeting with Community Renewal at 2 o'clock, and I met with my friend Mr. Rick Young over there. We met at a local coffee shop and had a nice catch-up. So that's all I see on my calendar for that day. But anyway, I don't have anything else, so we will move on to the next meeting. We are adjourned, and we'll move on to the Airport Authority. Item 1 is the, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. I am so sorry. No, you do. You let me know when you're ready, and we will do that.
Yeah, you gotta go here and leave this one.
Do we have to?
The new system
select
is
leave
working
meeting?
much better.
Municipal.
And it'll pop up in a second.
And then we wait for the next one to pop like
We
that.
have to
first?
go out, honey.
Okay.
How do you get out?
And then here in just a little bit, you'll get another green box for airport.
The blue boxes is that.
That one there?
Yep.
There we go.
One more time.
One more time. There we go.
And then you gotta leave.
Go leave there. There we go. We will get used to this. And I'll join that one. Thank you for coming up here. I guess that means, do you really want to do that?
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Think so? Good.
Are we good?
Think so.
All righty. Item 1 is consider approval of the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
No second.
And Travis. We have a motion and a second for approval of item 1. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 2, consideration of amendment to commercial aeronautical lease agreement. And Bonnie Wilson's here to see us. How are you, Bonnie?
I'm well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Doing great.
Hope all the commissioners are equally well. Since I'm here, you got to know it's good news, especially this late in the evening. So I am very pleased to come to you tonight to ask for permission for execution of an amendment to a commercial lease agreement. It is a business expansion plan. One of our commercial aeronautical service providers on the airfield has been doing very well, and he's decided that he would like to expand his opportunities and offer more services. Under the current provisions of his lease, he is allowed to lease aircraft, broker sales, and do restoration. And as we are seeing a change in the industry of a lack of A&P repair services, he said, well, why don't I go ahead and try to close that gap a little bit and seek permission to expand my business profile, bring on a professional A&P mechanic, and offer those services at Shawnee to enhance the opportunities for Shawnee's customers.
That sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
I thought it was pretty good, too.
Any questions? How about a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Mark and Daniel. All righty, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 2. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 3 is new business.
No new business.
Thank you, ma'am. We are adjourned and we'll move on to Municipal Authority. And I will wait. I promise. We good? Everybody in? I think I'm in. Okay. Item 1 is consider approval of consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Thank you, ma'am.
Second.
Amy and Darren. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve item 1. We'll call the question. I didn't get a little pop-up. It's probably something I did. Well, can I back out of that and then try to get in again, maybe? Or do you want to just ask me? That'd be good. I'll vote yes. That'd probably be faster at this point.
It's just gonna show 6 votes.
That's fine. So I just need to add mine to it then. See, that was there, and that didn't come up. I'm ready. Didn't realize you was waiting on me. I'm sorry. And it didn't pop up on my screen.
Oh, I just voted for.
Oh, did you?
Yes, we
Okay.
just move on to item 2.
Okay, very good. Did we? Item 2, confirm action. Okay, so item 1 passed 7-0, to make sure that that was clear. Item 2, confirm action taken by City Commission on agenda item number 4, that an emergency exists pursuant to 61 OS 130 and authorization for an emergency repair of the wastewater main on Chicago Street between Broadway Avenue and Bell Avenue in an amount not to exceed $72,400. Mr. Schmidt, it's all yours, sir.
Yes, as you just read, this is confirming the action taken on item 4 earlier this evening.
Okey-doke. We got any questions? If not, we need a motion.
Move to approve item 2.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Daniel and Cammy. We have a motion and a second to approve item 2. We'll call the question. That time it did. And motion passes 7-0. Item 3, confirm action taken by the City Commission on agenda item number 7 with respect to a resolution updating the city fee schedule by 1, setting the water rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections A and B, Section 26-26, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the City Code, and 2, setting the sanitary sewer rates for residential and commercial use, both inside and outside the city limits pursuant to subsections B and C, Section 26 through 27, Article 2, Chapter 26 of the Code of the City of Shawnee, and amend the residential deposit rates in Section 26-132A, Article 3, Division 2, Subdivision 2 of Chapter 26 of the City Code. And Lisa, it's your turn.
Yes, thank you. This is confirming action taken on the City Commission, agenda item number 7.
All righty, any questions? If not, do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second.
Aaron and Mark. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 3. We'll call the question. Motion passes 6 in favor and 1 against. Item 4 is confirm action taken by City Commission on agenda item number 8 with respect to a resolution updating city fee schedule by setting the monthly rates and fees for solid waste services pursuant to subsections A, Section 23 through 38, Article 2, Chapter 23 of the City Code. Your turn again, Lisa.
Yes, this item just confirms the action taken on City Commission, item number 8.
All righty. Do we have a motion, or are there any questions before we vote?
Move to approve.
Thank you, ma'am.
Second.
Thank you, sir. A motion and a second for approval of item 4. We will call the question. And motion carries 6 in favor and 1 against. Item 5, consideration of a sponsorship agreement between Shawnee Municipal Authority and the Pottawatomie County Development Authority, PCDA. Mr. Schmidt, your turn.
This agreement outlines the responsibilities for Shawnee Municipal Authority and PCDA concerning the wetland project at West Watkins Lake.
Yes, sir. Any questions? I know we've talked about that project in the past. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Aaron and Cammie. Okay, we have a motion and a second for approval of item 5. We'll call the question. Motion passes 7-0. Item 6 is new business.
No new business, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. We are adjourned. It's time to go home. Thank you.